And so those questions will come in. I'll sort of keep an eye on everything. I do miss some stuff. The pastors also keep an eye on it, but chat away and ask questions.
Then David moved down into the desert at Param, and a certain man of Manon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings with a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal of Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours.' Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them. And the whole time that they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, they'll tell you. Therefore, be favorable towards my men. Since we come at festival time, please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them." Then David's men arrived, and they gave Nabal the message in David's name, and they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and meat that I have slaughtered for my shears and give it to men coming from who knows where?" David's men turned around and went back, and when they arrived, they reported every word. Well, David said to his men, "Each of you strap on your sword." And they did, and David strapped on his on as well. And 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness and gave our master a greeting, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day, they were a wall around us the whole time. We were herding our sheep near them. Now, think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man, and no one can talk to him." Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 shells of roasted grain, and 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, "Go on and ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As they came riding her donkey into the mountain ravine, there where David and his men were descending towards her, and she met them, David had just said, "It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. And he paid back evil for good. May God deal with David be ever so severely if by morning I leave alive one male what am I just saying? May God deal with David." So he's making a vow essentially, right? So may God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face on the ground. She fell to his feet and she said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name, and his name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my Lord sent. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands. May your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal, and let this gift which your servants have brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battle, and there's no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God, and by the lives of your enemies. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away from the pocket of a sling. Let the Lord, when the Lord has fulfilled, for my Lord has a lot of lords here. My Lord, every good thing he has promised concerning him, has appointed him ruler over Israel. My Lord, David, will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or have the avenging himself when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success. Remember your servant. David said to Abigail, praise be to the Lord God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment, and keep me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you have not come quickly to meet me, as not one male belonging to Nabal will have been left alive by daybreak.
Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him, and said, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the household holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirit and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, I am your servant, and am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Abigail quickly got on a donkey, and attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Politel, son of Lesh, who was from Gilom. The Ziphites went to Saul, this is 1 Samuel 26. The Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, is not David hiding on the hill of Heklah, which faces Jeshim? So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with the 3,000 selected Israelite troops to search there for David. Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Heklah, facing Jeshim. But David stayed in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite, Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, who will go down into the camp with me to Saul? I'll go with you, said Abishai. So David and Abishai, went to the army by night, and there was Saul, lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. Excuse me. I won't strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be gentle and guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, he said, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and water jug that are near his head, and let's go. So David took the spear and the water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all asleep, because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood on top of the hill, some distance away. There's a wide space between them. Am I reading too far? No, sorry about that. There's a wide space between them. He called out to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, Aren't you going to answer me, Abner? Abner replied, Who are you who calls to the king? David said, You're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your lord, the king? Someone came to destroy your lord, the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug, and where near that were near his head? Saul recognized David's voice and said, Is that your voice, David, my son? David replied, Yes, it is, my lord the king. And he added, Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong am I guilty of? Now let my lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance, and have said, Go, serve other gods. Now do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, as one hunts a partridge in the mountains.
Then Saul said, I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong. Here is the king's spear, David answered. Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I have valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble. Then Saul said to David, May you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph. So David went on his way, and Saul returned home. But David thought to himself, One of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. So David and the 600 men with him left and went over to Achish, son of Maok, king of Gath. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Each man had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country towns, and I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you? So on that day Achish gave him Ziklag, and it has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. David lived in Philistine territory 1 year and 4 months. These were the men who came to David at Ziklag. While he was banished from the presence of Saul, son of Kish, they were among the warriors who helped him in battle. They were armed with bows and were able to shoot arrows or to sling stones right-handed or left-handed. They were relatives of Saul for the tribe of Benjamin. Here we go. Ahiezer, their chief, and Joash, the sons of Shema, the Gibeathite. Jeziel and Pelet, the sons of Asmaveth. Barakah, Jehu, the Anathothite, and Ishmai, the Gibeonite, a mighty warrior among the 30, who was the leader of the 30, Jeremiah, Jahaziel, Johanan, Jozabad, the Gederathite, Eluzai, Jeremoth, Bealiah, Shemariah, and Shephatiah, the Haruphite, Elkanah, Ishiah, Azarel, Joezer, and Joshabim, the Korahites, and Jeoleh, and Zebediah, the sons of Jeraham from Gedor. Now David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. From ancient times, these people had lived in the land extending to Shur and Egypt. Whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkeys and camels and clothes. Then he returned to Achish. When Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" David would say, "Against the Negev of Judah, or against the Negev of Jerahmeel, or against the Negev of the Kenites." He did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform on us and say, "This is what David did." And such was his practice as long as he lived in Philistine territory.
Bjorlo, Achish trusted David and said to himself, "He has become so obnoxious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant for life." In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." Achish replied, "Very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life." The Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The commanders of the Philistines asked, "What about these Hebrews?" Achish replied, "Is this not David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now, I have found no fault in him." But the Philistine commanders were angry with Achish and said, "Send the man back, that he may return to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands?" So Achish called David and said to him, "As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until today, I have found no fault in you. But the rulers don't approve of you. Now turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers." "But what have I done?" asked David. "What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish answered, "I know that you have been as pleasing in my eye as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said, 'He must not go up with us into battle.' Now get up early, along with your master's servants who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it is light." So David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. Some of the tribe of Manasseh defected to David when he went with the Philistines to fight against Saul. He and his men did not help the Philistines because after consultation, their rulers sent him away. They said, "It will cost us our heads if he deserts to his master Saul." When David went to Ziklag, these were the men of Manasseh who defected to him: Adnah, Jozabad, Jediel, Michael, Jozabad, Elihu, and Zilothai, leaders of units of 1,000 in Manasseh. They helped David against raiding bands, for all of them were brave warriors, and they were commanders in his army. Day after day, men came to help David until he had a great army, like the army of God. David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and had taken captive the women and everyone else in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men reached Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's 2 wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the daughter of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. but David found strength in the Lord his God. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. David and the 600 men with him came to the Besor valley where some stayed behind. 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley, but David and the other 400 continued the pursuit. They found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. They gave him water to drink and food to eat, part of a cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, who do you belong to? Where do you come from? He said, I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of the Kerethites, some territory belonging to Judah, and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag. David asked him, can you lead me down to this raiding party? He answered, swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down to them. He led David down, and there they were, scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking, and reveling because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until the evening of the next day, and none of them got away except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back. He took all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock, saying, this is David's plunder. Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him and who were left behind at the Besor valley. They came out to meet David and the men with him. As David and his men approached, he asked them how they were. But all the evil men and troublemakers among David's followers said, because they did not go out with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered. However, each man may take his wife and children and go. David replied, no, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and delivered into our hands the raiding party that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the man who stayed with the supply is to be the same as that of him who went down to the battle. All will share alike. David made this a statute and ordinance for Israel from that day to this. When David reached Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who were his friends, saying, here's a gift for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies. David sent it to those who were in Bethel, Ramoth, Negev, and Jatir, to those in Aror, Sifmoth, Eshtemoa, and Rechal, to those in the towns of the Jerahmeelites and the Kenites, to those in Hormah, Bor Ashan, Athek, and Hebron, and to those in all the other places where he and his men had roamed.
Well, Todd wins the reading contest. Way to go,
All right.
Todd.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So in what way could you shoulder responsibility for something that's going wrong in your home or your place of business, and by doing so, redeem the situation? What an interesting question. Because there's plenty going wrong today, isn't there?
Yeah, it's interesting. Then you think about Nabal and his situation and how he ran his household, and it was not good. It was not a good way, as, especially in biblical times, because in that time, they had their you are neighborly to one another, and if you aren't, then it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth kind of situation.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't have that nowadays in America. There are still some things in the Middle East that have that kind of rule and thinking. But here, especially nowadays, you got to we just got to make sure our family units are together and be responsible for them and their safety and their health. And it's interesting to think about it in our time. Like you said, Mark, it's with this COVID-19, like how are we responsible now? Well, maybe we need to make sure everybody has bandanas as we go out,
Yeah.
now. But we have a huge responsibility that God has given us as, especially, I think men, especially because men are, in Ephesians, we're called to be the leaders of our household, and we need to make sure that we're following God's way.
Yeah.
And so,
It's interesting for me with this question, and it, it hadn't really hit me, and I probably, if we hadn't been in this moment, I don't think it would have hit me. But I've been talking a lot and doing Zoom meetings with pastors all over the country, and I was in a Zoom meeting with about 30 pastors, and we're just kind of trying to figure out some best practices. And I'll bet half of the pastors in the room have been they've been paralyzed by this moment in time. They just have no idea what they could do or how to do it or what they should think. And it just kind of reminded me of just coming off the ship for our vacation and coming here and just going, there are all kinds of things that we can do. And like one of the things that I'll just take, for us, responsibility for, and it was something that has had some pushback from our people, but the idea of linking arms with Eagle Brook and allowing them to do our weekend service. And in my mind, it was just such a clear moment that in this setting, that one teaching on a weekend via video is not the most important element of our being the church. And it isn't it's an important element, but it's not the most important element. And it isn't an element that I felt confident that we could produce as well as I thought we should be able to produce it on a regular basis. And so just to say, listen, inside of our family of churches, there's one church that does this better than anybody else, and they're willing to share. Let's use what they're doing so that what our staff can do is different than that. Let's work hard to connect people. And man, I am so grateful that God gave me this idea for how we are going to pursue this moment. And last week, and this isn't a slam on churches, it's just the reality of things. I listened to a number of my friends in ministry try to produce online services that I thought were really hard to listen to because they were just awkward and cringy. And then I was with my family listening to the Eagle Brooks produced service, and I was with our church on my laptop kind of affirming as we were going. And I was like, this is beautiful, it's good, and we're able to create something so great as a church because of our other connectivity activities that, man, am I grateful that God had given, and this isn't me, this is God giving me eyes to see a direction and then a courage to pursue that direction. Even though I know it's not going to make everybody happy that we're pursuing that direction, but everybody's not happy that we're not meeting together. So I think there's times, and this is where I'll translate this into your worlds, that in our businesses and in our pursuits, we sometimes need to do things that are different than the rest of the people around us, and really just seek God and say, God, what do you have for my business? What do you have for this group, or Linfield? What do you have for my family? And it doesn't necessarily need to be what everybody else is doing. It can be something that's different than what everybody else is doing, and absolutely be the best thing for your families.
One thought, little different direction, Mark. When I think about that shouldering responsibility, and I think of conflicts, and when I get it right is when I take time to make sure that I'm hearing what's happening on the other side of a situation, rather than look at what the other person or the other people are doing wrong, and take a look at what am I doing either to contribute, or how does my reaction play into this thing. And that's hard. I'd like to say that that's what I do all the time. Connie's not in the room right now, so I can say whatever I want to. But the reality is, I don't do that very well, but when I do it, it's wonderful, the outcome.
Yeah, and picking up on a Jenny Pearson comment, it's interesting how Abigail was, I mean, willing to take responsibility for her husband. I don't know if you caught at the beginning of that reading, her like, let this rest on me. Let this be my responsibility. And she took responsibility, even though it really, in so many ways, wasn't. But as a result, 2 weeks later, she wound up with a new husband. So, I mean, so impressed was David by this woman's act of courage and wisdom that upon the death of her husband, he treated the death of her husband as that of the death of a brother of his and took responsibility for Abigail. I mean, that's really what was happening there. Mm-hmm. And here you have someone that had positioned himself as an enemy to David, and David took the responsibility of caring for Abigail in that moment. And ultimately, they wound up with quite a beautiful relationship, as I understand it. But all right, really, that's all we have time to kind of kick around. That was a long text today. Let me open us up, and Josh Poole, would you close us with a worshipful thought?
Yes.
Sing over us with trumpets or something like that. But God, thank you so much for bringing us together again this morning, and for us to have this time as a chance at the beginning of this weekend to recognize that you are God and that we are your subjects. And as we see so often in Scripture, when they encounter their Lord, they fall prostrate. And in our hearts, I ask that we would be brought to a place of coming to our knees and lowering our face to you and recognizing you as God, recognizing you as King, seeing you as worthy, seeing you as in control, and resting in the assurance that you have a good plan and a path for us to follow. Help us have courage to face the obstacles that we're going to face this weekend. Give us eyes to see how we can best navigate what is in front of us. And let us really pursue you with a reckless abandonment in the midst of all the busyness and all the hurriedness of our emotions and of all our activities. But God, we want you to be lifted high and see you as the King that you are in our lives.
Dear God, I just thank you so much for, again, for this opportunity to be together during a crazy time. And it just amazes me, God, not only how you are using the circumstances of a hard time in our world, in our country, to bring us together and closer to you, but how you constantly do that every day anyway when we seek you, Lord. And I just thank you for the stories of the Old Testament. They constantly remind us that when we wait on you and are patient and trust your sovereignty and your control, that there's a better outcome. And I just thank you so much for just always being with us and being there for us to reach out to you, Lord. And I just lift up our church and our communities to you, God, and I pray that you will help us to be able to encourage not only each other, but the rest of our church and the rest of our community and what it is that we see you doing right now through our church. And to be able to, by your Holy Spirit, just share what it is that you're doing. You're bringing us together in new ways, God, and you're growing us in new ways closer to you. And God, I just pray that we would just embrace that unity and that calling that you put on us, Lord. Help us to continue to encourage each other and continue to pray for each other and lift each other up. And God, we just thank you that you never give up on us, Lord, that you're always pursuing us. And God, just help us to take everything we do and filter it into prayer to you and for your will in our lives. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. There's so many people in the room, and I don't always get a chance to greet all of you, but I just want to give one shout out to Edie Johnson. Thanks so much for being here faithfully. It's awesome to see you every day. It's been really good to do this devotion alongside of all of you, but each one of you in particular matter. So thanks so much. That's it for today, gang. Tomorrow morning we'll be back here to start our Sunday, and I hope we see most of you back here again. God bless and have a great rest of your day.
Talk
Bye,
to you later,
everybody.
Mom.
Hi, Addie.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.